Welcome to No More Illusions, the show that helps you see clearly so you can soar. I'm excited to share with you a very special guest, Allen Weiner, author and advisor to senior executives and global organizations. I came across Allen when I read his recent book, The High Flyer Handbook, and connected with him on LinkedIn, and he was gracious enough to come on to the podcast. Welcome, Allen.
Flattered to be here. Not only gracious to be here, but flattered to be here.
Excellent, excellent. Well, let's get situated since we can't be in the same room. For our listeners, where are you calling from and what do you see when you look around or out the window?
Well, I'm in Calabasas, California, the home of Kim Kardashian, is what everybody says to me. Are you close to Kim Kardashian? Saw her at a car wash one time. And when I look out the window right now, I see a sunny day with a lot of wind.
Excellent,
So
excellent.
it's a nice place to be from. A lot of nice places to be from, but Calabasas, we've been here about 35 years and have always liked it here.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, your illusion was that I don't need to get along with others. I just need to make stuff. Now, tell us a little bit about how you came across this illusion and what does it mean to you?
Well, I found it in an article in the Wall Street Journal. As I joke around with so many people, I still get the real newspaper. I like to walk out in the morning to my driveway and pick it up like Tony Soprano used to do. If your listeners remember Tony Soprano. And I saw an article about an etiquette class that's being offered to what everybody calls tech bros in the Silicon Valley because there's a concern that they don't know how to handle themselves when they go to parties. Some of it has to do with how they need to know wines a little bit better, which kind of surprised me, or how to properly order turbo instead of turbot, or uh, uh, other things that have to do with properly handling yourself at a social event. And the very end of the article, one of the people that's encouraged to go to that said to his colleagues, I don't think we need to worry about that. We just have to make stuff. Well, so much of my work involves giving advice to people who think that they don't have to do anything to be part of the organization and show their humanity. They just have to stay by themselves in a room and, as the guy said, make stuff. So that is I could guess you could say, one of the more common illusions that are part of my practice. We were talking before about a big part of our practice is being better at doing presentations or sitting in a room and contributing to the generation of ideas. Very often, I'm told people need to be better at expressing their strategic mindset. But it so happens that this is a big one too. Talk to Jack, help him understand that he needs to get along with people better, read the room better, ask people questions to show how much interest he has in them. So that's what I would say is a troublesome illusion. I don't have to worry about that.
Now, Allen, I love this illusion, and I'm not asking you to psychoanalyze someone, but I'm just curious, with all your expertise coaching senior leaders over the years, where do you think this illusion may be coming from? Like, what's the thought process or what's the psychology that someone, because you and I don't think this way, right? But certainly other people do. Like, what have you seen or learned that how people get to this illusion or hold this illusion?
Well, some of it is vaguely related in some ways to what everyone's called EQ, right? There's IQ and EQ, and that they just don't have a particularly high EQ. And I think it's come from an inability over their childhood and into their young adulthood at not being able to open their eyes and look at what's going on. or open their ears and listen for what's going on. I heard this definition of genius once, which is a genius is a person that looks at what everybody looks at but sees what no one else sees.
Mm,
I think that people just have a hard time looking out and seeing what's going on and making a mental note of it. It's like
mm,
looking at the way, in fact, I think it's even included in this topic, looking at the way that people are dressed
mhm,
for work and thinking that they don't have to, well, certainly not have to worry about putting a tie on anymore, but just having clothes that are pressed that makes them look like they care about what other people think. In
Yeah.
fact, you could say in some larger sense, it's people saying, I just don't care what someone else thinks. It's not a part of my day is wondering what other people think about me. So they don't work hard to try to achieve a better relationship.
So I know we've been talking a little bit about this in the past as we prepped for this, but can you share a little bit with the audience what might be some drawbacks of laboring under this illusion and truly believing that your relationships and connection with others don't matter and just, going off as if, not that you didn't care, but that it doesn't matter?
Well, pretty quickly, you're going to find out that you're not the first one chosen for something that you'd like to be chosen for. You're not going to be invited to meetings that you'd like to be invited to, and you're going to wonder why. And
Mm,
you're not you just don't realize that some people are saying, "I don't know, I just have a hard time connecting with him or her," or the last time we had a meeting, he or she did not speak. So I don't know what they're thinking. I mean, there's a lot of drawbacks to this. And the biggest one is not not being seen and therefore not being chosen for things.
yeah.
And
I've
how
been
disappointing that is.
I've been thinking about this a lot, the difference between performance and success. In this conversation, let's call success being picked, right? For, to be
Right.
in meetings or
Yeah,
for
I think that's
projects.
a good way to put it.
And that it's not quite the same, and that people often judge your performance through you as a human being. I mean, it's very rare that any decision is made purely on data, right? Like we're always also looking at the human being. There's always that element, even if we won't admit it. It comes into our consciousness when we pick people.
Right. Right. I mean, if if you pick me to participate in something like we're doing today,
Mhm.
there had to been something. Well, first you read the book and thought, well, there's some interesting ideas here. And you think, well, all right, I'm going to follow that up and talk to Allen Weiner. And then you do, and you think to yourself, okay, interesting guy,
Mhm.
I hope, right?
Mhm.
That had something to do with what everybody calls the way I came across. Um, there's just as one example of that. There's a lot of energy in my voice when I speak.
Mhm.
I speak louder, and I think that energy would come across to someone like you as okay. I think I'll pick him. It could be interesting, and this is apart from the substance of the ideas, which hopefully you thought were pretty good when you read the book, right? But it would not have been enough. It would not have been enough had you called me the first time and we had hung up from that call and you had said, I don't know, just doesn't seem all that interesting a guy to talk to. And it would have been mostly from style matching up with the substance of the book.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing about having this conversation today, and the listeners may not know, but we kind of finalized the illusion today. We were batting around some other illusions before, and the interesting thing about what you picked, and I love the topic, is we had a we were planning a panel discussion for next week at my work, and we had a prep meeting with the panelists, and the topic is probably one you're very familiar and fond of, which is office politics and having
Aha.
to deal with office politics and how some people check out But checking out of office politics is actually an active decision. You think you're being passive, but by not engaging, it's actually you're making an active decision. Can you talk to us a little bit about that and how that fits into the whole framework?
Well, one thing I have said for years and years and years is reminded people who tell me I hate the politics around here.
Hmm.
The Greek root of politics is polite.
Really?
Yeah, right. The world is just asking us to be reasonably polite to the people that we work with.
Hmm.
So when, let's say, your boss is talking in a meeting
Hmm.
and you're all together and you, at minimum, nod your head, it's an act of politeness. You're
Hmm.
just saying, okay, I'm following what you're saying, as opposed to just sitting with absolutely no affect in your face. And then somebody tells you that. I couldn't read your reaction to what Fred was saying. And you say, well, I don't have to put myself out to show a reaction to what he's saying.
Hmm.
I hate that. I'm just going to sit with a no facial expression at all. It's even worse on a conference call when someone's talking and you don't hear the listener saying, aha,
Right.
aha, or right, right. That's exactly right. These little utterances that we make when we're listening that are really polite, but end up being called political.
Mm.
I don't want my client to agree to everything someone else says, but a regular dose of disagreement or a regular dose of negativism when somebody expresses an idea that they think might work is going to be called, uh, well, lack of political skill,
Hmm.
and probably called even worse. I just don't think he or she understands how to get along with other people here.
Yeah.
Just don't understand it,
Yeah.
which is a terrible accusation, really, that you don't understand it, which is probably not true. Yeah, I think that they've made, some of them, an active decision not to have any reaction. It's not accidental,
Yeah. Well, what I
right?
find especially damaging about this solution is if you don't recognize that this is a gap, let's say in your skills, let's just call it, uh, and you're not getting invited to those meetings, and I love that as an example, maybe you end up working on things that aren't going to improve your situation. Like, hey, I'm going to
Right,
work harder or I'm going to stay later. But if the key component is that people just don't like you because you're rude, or maybe you're not rude, but you're just aloof and you don't engage, people don't feel anything. The worst thing is if they feel nothing about you, right? Like, I would almost
right,
rather have someone dislike me because I have a pointed point of view and I debate with them, but at least they respect me, as to feel like I don't even know who that person is. I could care less about him. You're definitely not getting staffed or getting opportunities.
right. To make a name for yourself, which literally would mean to have other people even know your name, it takes effort.
Yeah.
You know, um, let's see if I can tell this quickly. My PhD dissertation had to be on a different topic than all of the research I had done up to then, which was in persuasion. So I chose friendship formation. And there's hypotheses, of course, that you put together about how people become friends. And the only one that really resonated was the degree of effort that one person would put out to meet someone else
Mm.
to become a friend. I had put people together in college classes that didn't know each other to see who became friends and made some predictions about that. But it turned out to be that effort was the big quality. And so when I was saying before I talk louder, one of those things is to show people how much effort I put into it,
Yeah. I mean,
right? Or get, I'm sorry.
that resonates with me so much, Alan. And like sometimes something will happen, and I know people are busy and schedules change, but sometimes you just get the sense that like someone who's always canceling on you or rescheduling, that it's not that they're so busy, it's that they're not making the effort to specifically meet with you, in the sense that they do it a certain amount of times. The regret and the apology level are not appropriate to the amount of time. After a while, you just feel like kind of beat up. You're like, why do I keep on trying to reschedule this
Right,
with this person? They obviously don't hold this
right,
as a priority. And then you have to decide whether to keep going or just, cut bait. But that resonates with me a lot, that effort. You can
right.
kind of feel it. It need not be explicit.
Just one little example of that. When I go to a building to have a meeting with people and I'm waiting in the lobby to be picked up and taken to that room,
Mm-hmm.
I never sit and
Okay.
wait. I'm always standing when they get there. I don't want them to think that I can just relax while they're working hard upstairs.
Mm-hmm.
So I stand when they come down to see me, I'm always standing. It's a
Mm.
small thing,
It's
but it's
subtle.
just a sign of effort. And I want to make sure that I say at this point, I am the first one to say that nothing matters as much as competence. It does start with competence.
Sure.
And there's five qualities that have been um, revealed forever that uh, at least maybe 80 years that Gallup knows are the five qualities that they ask questions about when they say, who are you going to vote for? And they are competence, composure, character, likability, and high energy. Well, competence is still at the top of the list. And I don't want to minimize the importance of bringing all of your brain power to a meeting when you go.
Sure.
But right past that are all of these other issues that naysayers that think all they do is make stuff are not paying attention to. I mean, if you take probably the biggest request I get as a consultant is to talk to people about executive presence. This has been huge the last 10 years.
Yeah.
We want to show people, I want all of our people to show other people a level of executive presence. Well, you either look like you have it or sound like you have it. So a lot of what I do is sound like you have it.
Mm-hmm.
Get to the point. Don't talk too fast. Don't go on and on and on and on, because then it's going to come across as lacking in control or presence. But you still have to consider looking like you have executive presence. The way you sit at a meeting matters. Of course, we talked a little bit about the things that you wear that come across to others as having executive presence. So I only bring that up because the people I work with are all competent. Nobody works with smarter people than I do. I said that in my first book. I am
Mm-hmm.
blessed to have smart clients, but still they're being asked to pay attention to things other than we just make stuff.
Yeah. The how people looks and executive presence is a topic that's near and dear to me. And a while ago, I came up with this concept. I call it the Tom Brady problem. Okay,
Let
so
me hear.
if you're in a room and you're not the person when they close their eyes they think of as the CEO, right? Like there's a archetype or a prototype of an American CEO. We all know what that is, right?
Yeah,
But if you the further you are from that, it's people are not going to assume you're in charge in a room where people don't know the titles, right? So you could be, and I'm not picking on anything specific, but you could be like black, female, you could be a person in a wheelchair. You're just not that image of the CEO. And you could be leading the meeting. You're in charge. It's clear that you're in charge, but people don't know. They're just coming in and they don't know you yet. You're new. And so you're in there and we do what we all do. We size people up visually, right? Like we walk in and we're like, oh, that person looks smart, that whatever, whatever.
Right.
And then so before the meeting starts and it's announced that you're leading it and everyone recognizes it by your titles, some guy walks in, tall, broad shoulders, Tom Brady looking kind of guy. He's there to pick up the mail, right?
Yeah.
But in
Right.
people's minds, it's like, oh, is this the guy leading the meeting, right? So I guess my theory is that, looks matter in the sense that we all have assumptions that before your mouth opens, right? Because what you say matters before titles are revealed. There are assumptions and, for lack of a better word, biases that we all have, myself included, right? Because I grew up in America, I work in American corporations, that will work against you the more you don't fit the mold or prototype. So people who are that way, it's not that they need more advice, but maybe some of the
Right.
traditional advice that's been given about executive presence doesn't go all the way for them, because that advice is for people who already kind of look the part. So they need some additional things to consider. So that was a theory I came up with a few years ago.
No, I think it's absolutely right. I mean, this is what we've always called first impressions.
Hmm.
And of all of the things to work on, these are the easiest things to work on. And the other thing is that the people that are looking at us and evaluating us generally have a standard in their mind of what we ought to look like and what we ought to sound like. I mean, the first thing you learn studying communication is that similarity is a pretty good predictor of clicking with someone. That if I think it's important how to dress to come to work, I think you ought to think it's important.
Hmm.
I remember telling my son when he got his first job, an internship, when you first meet your boss, keep your eyes open for everything your boss does. When he comes to work, what he does at lunch, what he does when he's at work, what he's reading, just keep your eyes open. I'm not telling you to be exactly like him, but don't ignore
Yeah.
those things. So if he comes around and you are at your laptop, it would be good if you're doing something with your laptop, right?
Well, what I find so funny about that is I've observed this in corporate America where, usually there's a dyad, right? There's like the chief who's like the partner, the VP, and they have like a number two. Everyone knows that that's your number two. And what you often see is they start to like dress very similarly, right? Like if the boss wears like a navy blue blazer with khakis, the number two generally
Right,
comes with a navy blue blazer and khakis. And
right,
I started
right,
calling it like the mini me effect. They
right,
become like a miniature version. And whether that's intentional or not, I mean, some of it can also just be if you really like a person and work closely with them, you start to absorb each other's qualities. That's just a human connection thing. But I often see that
right,
and I'm like, oh, they're like a mini me of like their boss.
right. I mean, it's not as if we want people to overdo it, to go too far in
No,
trying to be similar,
right.
but a reasonable amount of similarity when the two of us are talking and recognize similar things and have questions about them and enjoy talking about them is, I think, not the most important thing, but
Mm.
up there among the most important things.
Hmm. One thing that's interesting, because I've been podcasting for a while, Alan, and I used to do this more. I would listen a lot to my old episodes while I was editing it.
Right,
And what I noticed is in the most engaging episodes where I really felt a connection with the guest, our speech patterns started to overlap. Like our nonverbals, I tend to say, a lot, which is not a great thing to say. But then I would notice them saying, in a similar space, or I might pick up some verbal, for lack of a better word, verbal tics that they have. Because I just think there's this natural thing that happens with humans when you're vibing and you like each other, you start to adapt in a very organic way to emulate each other.
right. And there's a lot of similarities that the two of us have. I mean, the fact that we enjoy this particular topic, the fact that both of us smile when we're talking to each other, the fact that you don't have to go crazy trying to get me to participate in this, that we're both there for each other, trying to say something that makes each other's comment a little bit more valuable is such a relief.
Yeah.
I've said to people for the longest time, after an employment interview,
Hmm.
when the interviewer walks into another room
Hmm.
and someone says, "How did it go?" The very first comment is almost always, "I liked him,"
Hmm.
or "I didn't."
Oh.
Right? So, think about that. I liked him. I liked her. Well, that has to come from demonstration of behavior that would let the interviewer know not only is she going to be good at making stuff, I'm just going to enjoy talking to her,
Yeah.
being around her.
Yeah.
Right?
We spend a lot of our lives at work. We don't want to work with people that we don't get along with or don't particularly like. That's
If
natural.
right, right, right. If you don't, if it's if you don't have to work that hard to get to know someone,
Hmm.
which a lot of us bring that gift to work too. I'm willing to work hard to get to know someone and bring them out. And you'd be lucky if you were someone that didn't have these skills to be around someone that wants to help you, to make you better at it.
I know in your books, Alan, you talk a lot about the individual, but in the context of team dynamics, right? So it's not about just being a better team of one, it's about being a better person in the context of the flow of the team. And what I often like to think about is, you can have flow in a singular task, right? Like if I'm writing a paper or working on a spreadsheet, I can really get in the zone and be very creative or productive. But I think there's a flow that happens with teams. Like if you think about a sports team, and I'm not a big sports guy, but if you think about a sports team, there's like a flow where 5 members or 11 members are kind of like operating with one mind. The Navy SEALs talk about that too. When they go on missions, it's like, they switch leaders very seamlessly. Can you talk to us a little bit about sort of how important that is for the team to operate at a high level?
Well, I've talked a lot about, uh, just as an example, piggybacking on what someone else says in a meeting
Okay.
to keep the conversation going and flowing, and
Mm.
let everybody in the room know that you appreciated what you heard and you wanted to add to it. I mean, that's just one example of what goes on in a team meeting to make everyone feel like they are a part of that team. So if you say there's a couple of issues here that I think we ought to look at, and I say that's absolutely right, and I'll give you an example of one of those, that's piggybacking on what you said,
Hmm.
right? And then if I'm lucky and that's a good example, you're going to say something like, "Absolutely right. I wish I thought of that myself." And then somebody else in the room is going to say, "Yes, and I have another one." And all of these things just kind of build on each other, right? As opposed to just sitting in a room with your arms crossed, saying nothing.
Yeah. Well, maybe I'm overly sensitive, but what I hear happening a lot, Alan, in to use your example, is these are really good points you bring up, but like the
Right.
B word, it like negates what you said before. And now I'm just going to tell you, Alan, what's right, like what I think. Like I hear that happening a lot in meetings that are supposed to be collaborative, and they could just as easily say what you said. I hear you made a lot of great points, and here's what
And
I think.
right. Yeah, the my first book's title is "So Smart But."
That's right.
And I think a lot of people probably didn't give the book as a gift because of what it implied, right? The thing is, if what follows "but" is positive,
Hmm.
then no one begrudges the use of the word "but."
Right.
So, if I said something like, I don't know that it's going to work in the next couple of months, but I'm pretty sure it would work this winter. There's
Hmm.
no problem with that.
Not at all.
That's right. It's only when it's something negative after the but. And this is kind of an interesting topic too, because this is what I meant by people who listen listen to what other people listen to, but hear what no one else hears. So,
Mm.
I and you picked up on that but thing,
Hmm.
right? But a lot of people don't pick up on it. They
Yeah.
just don't hear it. And so they end up going to a seminar like the one I might do, where I point out to them, you've got to start hearing things
Yeah.
and enjoy the activity of concentrating on what you're listening to so that you really do hear it.
Yeah. Well, and to continue playing out your scenario after that person hears but, and then someone comes over the top, I believe their inclination is the next time that person says something who butted me, I'm going to butt them. Right. And it
Right,
becomes this very negative cycle.
right. That's exactly right. This is so much of what I meant when I said the root of politics is polite. Does
Hmm.
it hurt to show politeness in a meeting towards what someone else said? Well, let me add to that.
Hmm.
What when I'm talking to my clients, I tell them that 90% of what I do are called tips, and 10% are Allen's little mini lectures. And one of my mini lectures is you have to have at least a two-dimensional personality. It's important that someone say, when you first meet him, you may find him to be a bit introverted, but make no mistake, in a lot of other situations, they're quite outgoing. So,
Mm.
so even if someone says to you, you were really quiet in the meeting, it's important that you say to yourself, I guess at least I better speak up a little bit more in the next one so that I do have a two-dimensional personality. So that if someone says, I think it's even possible that if someone says most of what he wants to do is come here and just get things done. However, in a lot of other situations, I think you'll find him or her to be quite interesting and outgoing. That means you'd have to have at least a part of you that says, I have to work on this, even though most of what I do is enjoying getting things done. I can't neglect this part of it.
Well, there's two things I really like about what you're saying here, Alan. I hadn't ever really thought about it that way. So this is fascinating to me. The first being more multidimensional is actually who you are, but like often we don't make an effort to make that clear. We just kind of rest on the stronger or more prominent characteristics. So I love that you bring out, being more multidimensional, having that second, at least that second characteristic. And the other thing that what you were saying is bringing out to me is being active, right? Like when you said, you should make an effort to speak up in the second, it's like you're being active in creating people's perception of you rather than allowing people just to make their own judgments and not participating in that.
That is so interesting, really. What you said just now is so interesting to think about. That I'd want to know that the person I was working with would drive home that evening and more actively think about what they have to do to tweak some of these perceptions. Is there something I need to read? I mean, I generally am telling everyone, just open your eyes and look out at the world. If if you For instance, watch news programs on Sunday morning
Hmm.
that have a group of journalists talking about the week's events. All of them, knowing that the camera's on them and that the audience is watching them, they can't just sit there saying nothing. And when they do, their hands are reasonably animated when they're doing it. It isn't as if you have to read the old book Body Language to know that hands demonstrate a certain amount of energy
Hmm.
that you have when you're talking. But if you just watch those shows, you can say to yourself, I can do that. I can be just as interesting sounding as that person, particularly if I value the brains that I bring to this meeting. I know I'm a pretty smart man or woman, and I value that, particularly if you already have that going for you, and all you need is just a little bit more of whatever it is the world is looking for all of us to bring. You know, something else that I always told my son about was it's important to be 3 paragraphs deep on just about everything that's going on, so that if there's a conversation, you know just a little bit about it.
Right.
And one of the examples he gave me about that early in his career, he worked, his first job after the internship was as a staff member for a congressman. And one of the jobs he had was taking calls from people who hated the congressman's attitude about the Second Amendment
Okay.
and his voting record on the Second Amendment.
Sure.
So people would call and say, "I just hate him. How in the world can he be this way?" And Matt would say, "What kind of rifle do you own? Is it a Beretta?
Uh-huh.
Did you get it from your grandfather?" Right? He knew just enough
Hmm.
to know what the names of some of those firearms were to start a conversation with the caller, and everything really went well after that. And it
Mm.
was part of my thing about just know a little bit
Hmm.
about everything, even sports,
Hmm.
just a bit. So that, if someone in the meeting says, I'm going to watch the NBA finals this Saturday, I know enough to say, I think this is the first year in 20 years that the New York Knicks are back in it,
Yeah.
right? Just because I happened to see the sports page this morning.
Well, what I love about that advice, Alan, the 3 paragraphs deep, is that you are not required to be an expert in everything. You're not required to
Right,
follow someone around and try to become, like I had a boss who was really into hockey, right? So I'm not required to start going to hockey games and
right,
start ice skating, but I should have some ability to converse with him on his favorite topic, which he does with his kids and he did
right,
since he was in college. The
right.
other thing I've seen people do to good effect is even just a little bit of curiosity about something you don't know can go a long way. Say, oh, Alan, I heard you played a lot of hockey. You played in college. I never really understood the offsides rule. Can you explain that to me? It's like magic.
Absolutely. And one of the interviews that I did for the High Flyer Handbook, the person I interviewed said the quality that really impresses me, particularly in people that are new to the organization, is curiosity,
Hmm.
right? So here I
Interesting.
talk about competence, composure, character, and this person said, nothing impresses me as much early as curiosity. And that comes from asking questions.
Hmm.
Here's a little 1 paragraph deep for you.
Sure.
Aristotle, in rhetoric, you might call him the father of articulate sentences.
Okay.
How to make a good speech starts with Aristotle, you might say.
Hmm.
But Socrates was the father of question asking. And law school,
Mm.
for instance, is taught in the Socratic method. So the professor says, Jack, can you stand and tell everybody why the judge acted as he did or judged as he did. Well, I have said to so many of my clients, if you're not going to speak up at a meeting with your own ideas in meeting number one, at least in meeting number two, be the one that's asking all the questions. Be Socrates tomorrow if you were not Aristotle yesterday, or if you were Aristotle yesterday, let's have a little bit of Socrates tomorrow. And all that means is saying, that's so interesting. What gave you the idea? How did you come upon it? I mean, it's so flattering to be asked for your opinion about something or to know how you came up to something, came on to something. Um, one of the things that I wrote in my first book, which is, oh, I don't know, it's a troublesome word, but what I wrote was that the dirty little secret of being given credit for interpersonal skills is flattery. And
Mm.
I said in the book, I don't mean, Joe, you look terrific today, although I wrote that doesn't hurt either, right? I said that doesn't hurt. But I'm talking about, Joe, what's your take on? What's your opinion about? How do you see it? It's isn't it vaguely flattering to be asked to explain how you see what you see? I think it is,
Yeah,
right?
100%.
I mean, I think the word everybody agrees with is it's affirming, but the sort of smarmy word is it's somewhat flattering. And yet I think it's one of the keys to being thought of as having great interpersonal skills.
The word that I would use, Alan, is the person feels seen, right?
Thank you.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
really feel seen. Like I see you in the question, in the engagement. I remember the conversation in your high flyer handbook about the curiosity. I do remember that. And what I loved about the book was it got me thinking. It like stimulated a lot of thinking for me because there's a lot of different concepts there from the different interviews, right? So it's a little bit different than your first book, but I
Right.
love that there was just so like such a diversity of different opinions because everyone saw being a high flyer like slightly differently. And that conversation led me down a chain of thought where I was thinking, well, what is it that makes some people more curious than others? And I wasn't going to attribute it to like a genetic, predisposition to curiosity. Like what is it? And what I came up with is a lot of it is just you don't believe you have anything to learn from this person. Like a
There you
certain
go.
arrogance about it, right? It's like, you're dealing with someone maybe who's more junior than you and you're like, what could they have to contribute? I've been doing this for 20 years. And it's like you miss out on a lot of opportunities, one, to connect, two, to learn, and three,
Right.
sometimes to get warnings of like dire things that are wrong, but they're not going to tell you because they know you're so arrogant and you wouldn't pay attention anyway.
I think I have a title for a third book, and it would be Arrogance. Wouldn't
Oh,
that be a great title for a book? Arrogance.
yeah.
To think that you would build a reputation of being arrogant,
Hmm.
and what would that come from? And one of
Hmm.
those things would be, I don't need your opinion.
Hmm. Hmm. Well,
I
I
don't
think,
need anything except myself and what I make every day.
I think that brings us back, as you just did, to the tech bros and the arrogance. And there's something I wanted to ask you about, but the opportunity didn't come up until now. I think this is a good place to put it. What role do we all play in enabling that sort of behavior? I love the story, The Emperor's New Clothes, right? It's like the emperor's totally naked, but no one will say it except that innocent child who doesn't know any better. But what role do we play as executives, as team leaders, as employees in enabling that sort of behavior, whether it's through fear or, various other motivations?
Well, what jumped out at me when you first brought it up is the number of requests I've had to talk about feedback and how to give it how to tell someone that they need to be better. But what you're saying is, what about where it begins? What keeps people from wanting to to help? Yeah, well, I'm trying to think back on my days of remembering Myers-Briggs and right, and what it is about some of us that that don't get any pleasure for sure out of helping someone else to be a little bit better.
Mhm.
One of the things that I'm saying that I've talked about for a long time is that the books on executive skills, business books about executive behavior are almost identical to parenting books.
Mm.
And I guess it would imply that to be a good parent and want to develop all of these qualities in your kids relates a little bit to being a senior person in an organization who ought to have that same instinct
Mhm.
of pleasure that you would get out of bringing these things out in especially new people who come to work, because the high flyer handbook was intended for, if you're new, this is what people are seeing in you or not when you're new to the job. So I guess there's a certain instinct some of us have to help, and that some of us lack. I wanted to be a consultant from day one.
Mhm.
I've never had a job. I opened up my office the day after I got my PhD. Well, I did work for my father in his clothing store. But other than that, I've never really had a job. I've never working for someone. I've always had my own firm. But I know that I got so much pleasure out of someone saying, Alan, that's a good tip.
Mm.
Good
Well,
tip.
the parenting metaphor resonates with me a lot. Another metaphor I've come across that I really enjoy is sort of like a gardening metaphor, like cultivating people, right? So
Yeah,
the person's growing and you're not forcing them, but you're helping them. You're fertilizing, you're giving sunlight, you're giving water, you're cultivating them so they can become the best version of themselves.
right. Right. I mean, when you look back on your career at whoever it is that's out there at the end of it, so much of it's going to come from the very topics that you and I have been talking about today.
Yeah.
And I know that my wife was an elementary school teacher, and there were people that would run into her
Hmm.
on the street years later that would say, Mrs. Weiner, you were such a great teacher. I mean,
Wow.
isn't how lucky she was to hear that?
Yeah. Yeah. So as we start to wrap up, Alan, just curious, what have you seen as the outcome as people start to come around and see that this is an illusion, start to work on their people skills and connect better with people? What are some of the potential outcomes if they start to change their behavior in a way?
Well, as we said at the beginning of this, you'd finally be invited to meetings. and,
That's good.
and that's a good thing. And you'd be chosen to participate in some kind of project because people recognized how smart you were because you said things in meetings or participated with other people in problem solving that gave them the impression that you'd be good to have on the team, right? In talking about metaphors, it's like draft day where players are waiting to find out what teams are going to draft them.
Hmm.
It'd be like finding out on Tuesday morning somebody wants you to be a part of that team.
Hmm.
Would be how you would know that there's a real payoff to having a little bit of what that article called etiquette, which was truly really better people skills.
Hmm. Interesting. I have to share with you one last thing about Tom Brady. So I wrote an article about this because I learned a little bit more about him as I was thinking through this whole Tom Brady metaphor for executive presence. And there's a great irony, Alan. The great irony is Tom Brady was actually recruited very late in the draft
I think I'd read
because,
that.
yeah, because of his physical attributes. He didn't seem like, a very robust, strong, fast NFL quarterback. So, in a way, he suffered from a bias against quarterbacks that could have prevented him from becoming this amazing Hall of Fame quarterback. So, if Tom Brady can suffer from the Tom Brady problem, so can all of us.
Neither one of us may be enough paragraphs deep to know this, but when players are drafted,
Hmm.
there's also a test they take.
Oh, really?
Yeah, both of us should look for that. There's a test that they take that includes demonstration of team membership skills
Interesting.
that worries some of the teams that have drafted them. So when they go to these camps, they're
Hmm.
not only running faster
Hmm.
and catching more and throwing farther,
Hmm.
they also have to be reasonably good at this test, which, darn it, will jump out at me about 5 minutes after this call is over. But look into that, and I will too,
Yeah, yeah.
because it, it probably nobody would want to know that when they were first invited to one of the tech bros companies
Hmm.
to maybe take a position there, that they were going to have to take such a test to find out if they would be able to work with others in an effective way. Wouldn't
Very
it
interesting. Very
be
interesting. Well,
interesting?
Alan, this conversation has been delightful. I really enjoyed
Oh, for me
continuing our
too.
conversations from before. If folks who are listening in the audience want to learn more about your books, about you, about your organization, and how you can help, what's the best way for them to learn more or get in contact with you?
Well, of course, there's a website, www.cdaconsulting.com. If you Google Allen Weiner or you Google either of the books, you'll find out a lot about me and the organization as well. And of course, listening to your podcast would be a prime way to learn a little bit more about Allen Weiner. And by the way, one of the things that I'll tell someone the very first time I'm asked about this podcast is I'm going to say, Joe is so good at making a connection, if for no other reason, and there were many, that you said my name so often.
Ah, interesting.
And I am going probably to recommend to someone at
Uh,
a seminar next week that they do the same thing.
love it. Love it. Love it.
When they say I can't remember people's names, well, use it more often, and you
Yeah,
might, right?
definitely. Well, Alan, thank
All
you so
right, Joe.
much for coming on
My
the show.
pleasure.
Quick announcement, folks. I'm excited to share that Unlock Your Executive Presence, Feel Like a Boss is now available as an audiobook. You can get it now at connectioncounselor.com or just search Unlock Your Executive Presence on Amazon or Audible. It's my second audiobook, and I took a lot of care in producing and narrating it for those of you who'd rather listen than read about how to actually generate executive presence. Thanks for listening to No More Illusions. I'm Joe Kwon, the Connection Counselor. Take care and remember, clarity reveals, illusion steals.